can hardly stitch 5 words together, but I'll try. And it's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. I've never been to this part of the world. I'm from Seattle, originally from Los Angeles, and I figured that I'd come here and get a little sun, but now I'm just at home again, so I feel pretty comfortable about that. Let me tell you about how I got to where I am today, because it's an amazing story. And I think of my work, I think I'm a storyteller. I think that I'm a commentary on what's happening in the world. I'm a historian. I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in our world. People call it climate change, climate chaos, climate crisis, climate catastrophe. So I think of it as environmental imbalance. The reason we have environmental imbalance is because there is one dominant species. If it's luck or bad luck, or it's the opposing thumb, here we are, okay, with everything that we're touching. We're damaging this planet. And I'm worried for my children and for their children's children. And that is what my story is about. I started painting about 15 years ago. I remember the exact time. I was on a plane ride to Japan. And I had this love for Japan for a long, long time. And I practiced bonsai and Japanese gardening. And Japanese gardening has actually taught me so many principles of art. I think of it as living sculpture, proportion, patterns, composition, harmony and balance. Those are all things that I strive for in the garden, and those are the things that I strive for in my work. And when you look at my work later, see if you can find that sense. So anyway, I was going to Japan because I had started a company in my apartment. And the company was in the knife and tool business. And I turned this little company into one of the top knife and tool companies in the world. And I became what I think, in my humble opinion, probably the top designer in the world for these products, because I thought of them as an art form. It was a medium. There was proportion and style and materials, and it was sculptural, and yet they were mini machines. They were functional, they had to work. And so I brought a whole new sensibility to that industry, which was predominantly kind of an old school industry. So I was flying to Japan, and I had just bought my first iPad, and I had the SketchUp program on it, and I wanted to draw the Japanese garden, because the one thing about the Japanese garden, or any garden for that matter, but especially the Japanese garden, is that it takes decades to enact change, right? Long time. Sometimes they think traditional Japanese artists, when I was at the Imperial Palace, they were saying they were about to cut this branch off of this bonsai. They were going to do it in 2 or 3 years because they thought that 30 years from now it would look about right. But with my Western mentality, I thought, well, maybe I can start to draw the Japanese garden and scratch that itch. So I started to draw, and it was as if lightning had struck me. It was as if a switch had been thrown. And I drew and painted all the way to Japan, and couldn't wait to get back on the plane to draw all the way coming home again. Because I realized I could have that creative spark without logistics and sales feasibilities and human resources and supply chain logistics and all the things in the business that it took to create a product. So I came home, and my wife is an art collector, and I showed her what I had drawn on the iPad. I go, honey, look what I've done. She goes, that's very, very nice, dear, you know, it's very nice. I go, but no, digital art is a legitimate art form. I go, even David Hockney does digital art. She goes, yeah, but he's David Hockney. So I said, well, you got a point there. So she said, if you want to be an artist, then pick up the brushes. And so I did. I started in gouache and watercolors, and I wanted to do Japanese screens and Japanese prints and stuff. And then I moved into acrylics, and then I moved into oil. And when I got into oil, it was, I had landed. Somehow that medium just suited me. The buildup of layers and the ability to change things, you know, was actually, you know, perfect for me. And so I started painting it, and while I was painting, these stories would creep in. I was talking to myself, these stories about things and about, well, you know, man versus nature, and is man part of nature? Is man against the natural process? How do we equate that? Is this all destiny? You know, the dinosaurs disappeared. You know, so is that part of the natural cycle? But we don't want humanity to disappear. And so really that conversation becomes a factor of perspective and timeline. It's like if we look at it today versus looking at it 10,000 years from now, you know, it could be quite different. So it was winding into my work, and I decided to really, you know, pursue that and spell it out, and that's where the work comes from, you know, today. And it's been very, very well received. I had 2 shows in Manhattan recently, and I was amazed at the people, especially the young people, how interested, how perceptive. You know, it's their world. And I think that this is, you know, all of our arts are going to play a major role in creating change. And so that's the optimistic part of my work, is that by understanding, we can create change. Now, I had this art collector not that long ago, and very, very big art collector, and she said, Spencer, she said, your work is so perfect. She said, so beautiful. She said, but you always ruin it. I said, well, that's true. I said, but really it's a reflection of what's happening. Okay, it's not me trying to ruin it. It's a personal journey for the viewer to be able to go into the painting and see what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is that man as a species is affecting this planet in an unbelievable, accelerating way. And I don't think many people understand that this is not a linear thing that's happening. This is a geometric progression that's happening. Everything that happens has a greater cause. And so, you know, we laughed about it. I said, well, I don't have any blood and guts in the painting, you know, I mean, it's not like it's, you know, that downtrodden, but I thought that was pretty funny. And so, you'll see that in all my work that there is, you know, man-made element, and I take the point of view of the animals, and because the animals, in a way, create this perspective that they're watching this go on. If they could talk, if they could come together, you know, and especially the birds, and especially, you know, the fish. And in the Northwest, salmon is a very important part of our culture. But the salmon, which many, many species revolve around in that ecosystem, is symbolic of throughout the world. It doesn't matter what. So I want the pieces to be universal, but yet that is where where a lot of the spirit comes from. And my process is very instinctual. Another person asked me, well, how do you determine what you're going to paint? And I said, well, that's easy. I open the newspaper. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But what was I going to say? But anyway, so another thing that I really like is this participation of the viewer versus the artist. And by having the detail, you can stand back from it and it becomes very cohesive, or you can get into the painting and you can see the details of it. So there is a participation that is necessary for the viewer. It makes for a very interesting viewing process, and over time creates more interesting work, I think, because you don't get tired of it. You know, a static view can be a little bit static. A dynamic changing view is always, you know, going to be more interesting. And so that is where the art comes from. And you can see, if you haven't already, that this collection of works is really indicative of many different issues. This one that you all can see, which is The Gathering, has many of the animals, and they're all looking like they're coming together. And the only black and white thing is the whale, is the orca. And the rest of the animals are kind of circling in a way. And the waterfall, the salmon, and in the back you'll see that there is almost hieroglyphics. And if you really look at it, there's a lot of stories in it. There's a loss of biodiversity, there's wildfires, there's pollution, there's the water risings. I mean, it goes on and on. And so you can kind of see that this piece is kind of the keystone for the collection. And this piece over here, Cruel Oil, comes from growing up in Los Angeles. So in growing up there, I saw what industrialization really causes. And I lived next to a place called the La Brea Tar Pits. Anybody been there? No? Yeah, no. And I, as a kid, I'd watched the oil bubbling up. And it stuck with me. And on the mountains, there were the pump jacks. And the pump jacks were like birds pecking. I always saw them. And so my idea was, if I could put the natural with the man-made together in a way that was compelling, that it would show the tension and how dependent we are on the oil as a civilization, which is, when you think about it, is a prehistoric notion. And so in doing that, it was very challenging, but I think I pulled it off, where the two came together in a way that was inspired, again, by that Japanese garden, by that ability to place rocks and know when they resonate. And so for me, it's a real spiritual process. And like I said, I'm intuitive. I'm not sure always what the end is going to be like, but I kind of have an idea. And this piece over here, Eagle's Nest, check that out. There is a lot behind it, including DDT, which is kind of funny because of Betsy's work and by the Peterson work, which I didn't even know about, until I started reading about the gallery. And so that was good. And the funny thing, the serendipity of that is that painting wasn't going to be here originally. There was another painting, but that piece is traveling through Canada and through the United States, so I had to substitute it, and we got the DDT there. So, and the next one down is the owl, and the world's on fire, and the owl's looking out with the indiscriminate logging, and it's saying, "Oh my God." And there's another piece there called Damming, which is about hydroelectric power. I mean, hydroelectric power is a gift to those who have it. It's green. I mean, it is, ever producing. It's fantastic. And yet, the other side of it is the cost to the environment, which is why many dams are being looked at, are being taken down now. And in the Northwest, we're taking, several down. So it's not an opinion of what should be. It's to have a conversation, so we can all have a conversation and kind of try to figure out collectively how we're going to take this world forward. And so, anyway, I hope you get to look at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions right now about the work or my process, or anything about anything, actually. Come on, somebody has one.